The history of Afghanistan is full of stories of war by ethnic tribal groups and foreign invaders. Invasions of Afghanistan by foreign armies date back to the days of Alexander the Great. Even the great Genghis Khan ransacked Afghanistan in 1221, where for over a year he burned and devastated its cities.
Afghanistan is also known as Aryana or Bactria, and during the Middle Ages it was known as Khorasan. Afghanistan was ruled by foreign powers until the 18th century. After the British departed, a unified kingdom was established, and the monarchy lasted until a pro-Soviet coup took power in 1973. The king was forced into exile in Italy.
The modern-day history of warfare in Afghanistan fared no better, for its people were dominated by British imperialism for almost a century until forced out in 1919. Then came the Soviet Union in 1979. For years, the Soviets had their eyes on controlling Afghanistan. They got their chance when they engineered a coup d'etat in December 1979 and installed a puppet government loyal to Moscow. The Soviet army came under fierce resistance by various Afghanistan rebel groups that came to be known as the Mujahideen. After 8 years of futile guerrilla warfare and billions of dollars spent on fighting the war, the Soviets were driven out of Afghanistan. Fighting between the communist-backed government and the Mujahideen continued, only with material and monetary aid provided by the Soviets was Mohammad Najibullah's government able to survive. But the collapse of his rule was inevitable, for after the fall of the Soviet Empire in 1991, Najibullah was overthrown by the rebel forces of Ahmad Shah Massoud. A new authority now ruled in Kabul, an Afghan authority, but differences between the two men immediately arose. Seeking to resolve these differences, an interim Islamic Council appointed a coalition government, but it was not meant to last, for troops loyal to the ethnic Uzbek strongman Abdul Rashid Dostam switched sides, precipitating large-scale fighting in Kabul and in the northern provinces. This fighting caused thousands of civilian casualties in Kabul. The country sank even further into anarchy when other ethnic forces divided their loyalties among tribal grounds, thereby fragmenting the country even further and pushing it deeper into civil war. For the time being, ethnic Tajiks controlled Kabul and much of the northeast, while local warlords exerted their power over the rest of the country. Thus began Afghanistan's civil war and the rise to power of the Taliban. The Taliban developed enough strength to capture the city of Kandahar from a local warlord and proceeded to expand its control throughout Afghanistan, occupying Kabul in September 1996. Taliban sought to impose an extreme interpretation of Islam based in part upon rural Pashtun traditions and committed massive human rights violations, particularly directed against women. Women were restricted from working outside the home, pursuing an education, were not to leave their homes without accompanying male relatives, and forced to wear a traditional body covering garment called the burqa.
On 9 September 2001, Ahmed Shah Massoud, the leader of the Northern Alliance, was assassinated. After 9/11, the United States demanded the surrender of bin Laden. The Taliban refused. Russia supplied the Northern Alliance with equipment, weapons and ammunition. The United States Special Forces assisted the Northern Alliance in combat operations. They called in airstrikes, coordinated tactical movements, and advanced with the Northern Alliance to victory. On 7 October, they recaptured Mazar-e-Sharif. On 9 November, captured Kabul, and 4 days later, the Taliban abandoned Kandahar.
Sponsored by the UN, Afghan factions met in Bonn and chose a 30-member interim authority led by Hamid Karzai. After governing for 6 months, former King Sahir Shah convened a Loya Jirga, which elected Karzai president and gave him authority to govern for 2 more years. The enemies of the Afghan government are most active. Individual warlords block assistance in the north and the west of the country. A regrouped Taliban is now stepping up attacks and have been doing so since the start of spring in 2003. In the south near the Pakistani border, the Taliban either rocket or ambush U.S. and Afghan forces almost weekly. Security in Kabul is being provided by the international peacekeeping force known as ISAF. However, in August of 2003, NATO has now assumed that responsibility. This responsibility will be NATO's until the national Afghan army can provide the security necessary to safeguard its own borders and protect its own people. Kabul is still not a safe place. Since we've arrived in Kabul, we have had firefights in front of the American embassy. An ISAF vehicle drove over a landmine, and a car bomb exploded, killing 4 German soldiers and wounding 31 on their way home to the airport.
your rounds in it. See how it's better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Reconstruction of the country is slowing to a crawl or grinding to a halt. More than 2,000 people have died in factional fighting since the defeat of the Taliban in November-December 2001. A $50 million campaign to demobilize 100,000 militia fighters started in June-July 2003. The militia, however, will not hand over weapons to the current Ministry of Defense. Only when there is a demobilization process implemented by international forces in collaboration with the Afghan National Army will the Afghan people support it.
Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld has visited Afghanistan twice in the past year. And recently, after a 5-country tour of the Persian Gulf, announced the transition of the country to a period of reconstruction. We have found that the people of Afghanistan are extremely friendly and curious about Westerners and are always willing to stand next to you while you take their picture.
Okay, it's gone? We have painted a grim picture of Afghanistan. Regardless of the actual situation, we always find something positive. Not far from the embassy, there are restaurants with good food, a pizza place, a German beer garden with authentic German food, a Chinese and Iranian restaurant with excellent chicken and beef kebab.
Slip off that letter.
Our living accommodation are located on the embassy compound. They're small. However, we have a refrigerator, a television, individual bathroom and shower. The gym, pool room and laundry facility are only minutes from our quarters. Once in a while, we have some entertainment, like the British Regimental Fife and Drum Band.
By the center! Quick! We got a big spoon to stick in here. You can't say too much.
Apple burns kicked in or something?
Whoa. You don't eat that kind of beans, you don't know nothing.
Jeff, how's the food?
Delicious.
Yeah, that was good.
Andy?
This is the best food in Kabul. All of Kabul. All of Afghanistan. Hey, baby, I'm home. Yes, boss. Boss. Take pictures with the
What lies ahead for Afghanistan? The future of Afghanistan is mixed and uncertain. What lies ahead will depend on putting Afghanistan on the road to peace, but it requires more than good intentions. Afghanistan's stability and reconstruction are increasingly threatened by violence, especially against aid workers. The rise of a neo-Taliban movement, particularly in the Pashtun parts of the country, and narco-trafficking by regional warlords and others. President Karzai's government has complained bitterly that $4.5 billion in promised international aid is not only woefully inadequate, but has mostly failed to materialize. Afghan's finance minister, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, warned that the country could become a narco-mafia state unless the world honored its promises to support it after the fall of the Taliban regime late in 2001. As a result, much-needed reconstruction work cannot proceed over large areas of the country. The longer Afghans are made to wait for concrete signs of greater progress, the easier it will be for extremists to exploit their resentment and for criminals to profit from the institutional vacuum that results. And where does that leave Afghanistan? The reconstruction of a new democratic Afghanistan essentially must succeed. It must succeed for the sake of the Afghan people, for the region, and for the world community. Much hangs in the balance, and failure cannot be an option.
British domination was a failure. Soviet domination was a failure. And 14th century radical Islamic thinking is and was a failure. 25 years of war left this country in a shambles. Old Islamic traditions and behavior cannot be changed in one lifetime. Reconstruction will be an uphill struggle. However, as long as there's a will, there will be a way to rebuild this country. ranges and mountain troops. We teach, train and fight. Our task the oppressor labor, our day free the oppressed. We have seen the Central Islands, our task was not in vain. From battles to South Vietnam, from Iraq to Africa, from Chikurka to the Balkans, OSS to Green Beret, Special Forces all the way. We are airborne rangers and mountain troops. We teach, train and fight. Our task the oppressor leader, our day free the oppressed. We have seen the Central Highlands, our task was not in vain. From battles to South Vietnam, from Iraq to Africa, we have fought the Taliban and free Afghanistan.